Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 15th, 2013 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room if you'd like to pick one up. If you haven't already, please do so, and you can follow along with the business matters we'll be addressing this evening. On that agenda, you'll notice that there are multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that we will be discussing specifically tonight, as well as with respect to an opportunity for comments of a general nature regarding items that are not on our agenda, and you'll see that on item 4. It is customary for us to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point in the meeting I would ask that everyone please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Rankin?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3 in our agenda, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of minutes to review and approve tonight, and those are from our January 8th, 2013 regular council meeting. Do any members of the council have any changes, comments, corrections, questions with respect to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved. Thank you. I'd like to pause at this point to recognize a couple of special young ladies who are here in the audience tonight. They're going to tell you a little bit more about why they're here. But Madeline Kirshner and Jackie Clifford, who are two seniors at Downers Grove South and members of the DECA program, reached out to me a number of weeks ago and asked whether we would recognize and promote women's entrepreneurship as a day in Downers Grove, which is one of the projects that they have been very passionate about, and I'll let them explain it far more eloquently than I can. But I would like to read a proclamation and then present it to these two young women. Whereas the DECA, an association of marketing students, prepares emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management. And whereas DECA has presented youth with the opportunity to interact with business professionals to gain valuable insight into leadership, business, and career possibilities through cooperative education. And whereas Madeline Kirshner and Jackie Clifford, seniors and members of DECA at Downers Grove South, will promote women's entrepreneurship as their state project. And whereas Ms. Kirshner and Ms. Clifford will host a vendor show on January 23rd, 2013 to introduce young women to the world of entrepreneurship, now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim January 23rd, 2013 as Women's Entrepreneurship Awareness Day in the Village of Downers Grove, and encourage our citizens to join me in supporting our students and in recognizing the positive influence this organization is making on today's youth as they prepare to enter the workforce. So I think this is a great idea, and I'm glad you brought this to our attention. And ladies, if you would please come down, it'd be my privilege to present this proclamation to you. And then if you'd like to share a couple words about your project, we welcome that as well. Come down here so the folks at home can see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we got a pose for Mom here.
Oh, yeah.
That's for you. Thank you. And the podium is yours.
Well, first of all, we'd just like to say thank you for supporting us in our cause. We are both in the Club DECA at Downers Grove South, and as seniors, we were trying to think of a state project to do. And we were talking with our advisor, Ms. Poland, and she let us know that there were only 40 girls within the 170 members of DECA at Downers Grove South. That is less than 25%, and we thought that this was a concern because we as women believe that, you know, girls should have the same opportunities as men in the business field. And it's not that they don't, it's just that they don't know that they can be an active role within the business field. So because of this, we decided that our state project would be promoting women's entrepreneurship to our community and to our fellow peers. So on January 23rd, 2013, we will be hosting a vendor show where local women entrepreneurs will come in and kind of explain their business and how they got started. So we are very excited for that, and we're hoping all goes well. What do you want to say? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing that, and congratulations on your initiative, and best of luck with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Quite an inspiration. Thank you. And I couldn't help but notice that Commissioner Durkin is just beaming with pride that you're both from Downers Grove South.
I'm a little bit of a minority up here. It's really between Jeff and I and the mayor, north and south.
That's right. That's right. You're still
I'm a
on
mighty
my.
Mustang like you, so proud of it.
I was smart enough to marry a Mustang. That brings us to item 4 on tonight's agenda, which is the segment of the meeting that we reserve for public comments with respect to matters not appearing on our agenda. So any general comments or questions that any members of our audience might have with respect to any items, now would be the time to please come down to the podium and give us your name and address, and we would welcome hearing from you. As some folks are making their way to the podium. Good evening.
Reverend Scott Oberly from First Congregational United Church of Christ, 1047 Curtis Street. And I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Kirk Moore, pastor of St. Paul's United Church of Christ, 5739 Dunham Road.
I'm Reverend Dan Martinson of Hobson Road Community Church, 2531 Hobson Road, Downers Grove.
Good evening.
Good evening. The reason we're here tonight is we'd like to start a dialogue with the City Council about the stormwater fees and how they affect the local congregations in Downers Grove. One of the things that is a concern for us is while we understand that the churches all use city resources and water and stormwater, that it does limit our ability in our budgets to minister to those in the community. And each of us is affected, each of our church communities are affected by this. We'd like the council to reconsider that fee on the communities of faith in the Downers Grove Township. And I'll let my colleagues speak to
To speak more directly to what Scott is saying, our church budget, which is not large. Some churches are larger than others. We have a small church budget, and our budget was impacted by $2,000 for the coming year. And that's $2,000 that we can do less. And we're a very community active congregation, very involved with the Scouts, very involved with many civic groups that meet at our congregation. And we don't want to not do those things. And so this isn't a threat to not do those things. It's just saying that we can do less when the community involvement we have isn't taken into account with fees like these, like the stormwater drainage fee.
I'll just echo what my fellow pastors have said. And add, I'm new to Downers Grove in terms of my pastorate here. I've just been with our church since July. But I'd like the council to know that this is not merely a matter of individual churches that are upset about the impact on their individual budgets. What I found in Downers Grove, and this is, I'm proud to say, a very positive, unique thing, is that our faith community is wider than just the walls of any one church. There's a good partnership amongst pastors. We represent many other pastors in this community that work together, not just at what you might term the faith exercise of what we do, but really serving our community. By way of example, our charges this year will approach $3,000. That represents more than half of what our church was able to put directly towards benevolence means last calendar year. That is to say, not worship services, not Christian mission work, nothing like that, but literally benevolence needs within our community, helping someone out with their rent, helping someone put gas in their car, helping folks with some meals and things like that as they have need. And what I'm looking at is a situation where we're going to be having our ability to do that cut by more than half. We had a dinner last month on our church property where 200 people came and had dinner. About 100 of those people came by way of local food pantries and PADS homeless shelters. Those are folks that if it weren't for the faith community in Downers Grove, I think would be looking to municipal structures for help. And so what we're really doing, I would want you to understand, is an extension of the way you serve the community. And we've been terribly, terribly impacted by this fee. Quickly, I would ask as well, the fee feels to me like a tax. And as you know, not-for-profits are tax exempt. If the fees stay in place, and if it's your decision that they go forward, I would ask that you would give us an explanation from a legal standpoint of how it's not a tax. When I see the fee, I see a fee that a municipality is charging for a service. And as I said, that's not the way we're accustomed as not-for-profits to doing business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just in close, I'd echo with my colleagues that we really want to partner with the council. We feel the faith community offers a lot, especially for the marginalized and those that are falling through the cracks, trying to, in this economy, make ends meet, and our ability to outreach. And so just hope that we can dialogue and continue this together, this work together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Love the Mustangs, Downers Grove North, Class 83.
I understand that was an exceptional year. Thank you, gentlemen, and clearly we empathize with your points. The council, both current and prior councils, were uniquely aware of the impact that a stormwater utility fee would have on not-for-profits, not only with respect to faith-based organizations, but all not-for-profits. Because the concept of the stormwater utility fee, to get a little bit into why it's applicable, is because it is a fee that's charged to all properties that generate stormwater runoff. And the reality is that rainwater doesn't make any distinctions between a faith-based property and a non-faith-based property. One of the things that we found when we were exploring this possibility, because the other alternative would have been to simply raise property taxes or borrow money or do something else, was that we found that our residential property owners were carrying a disproportionate burden or share of the cost of stormwater maintenance and infrastructure costs. And there were a lot of properties that weren't really contributing to the overall cost of stormwater management, which we have no choice but to do. It's partly because we have to, partly because it's the right thing to do, and partly because the federal government tells us we have to do it without providing us any funds. I know you're very familiar with that situation. And this was, one aspect of it was to try to make it more equitable in terms of spreading out amongst more properties, because all properties generate stormwater runoff to some degree, and obviously there are distinctions between those two. So it is different than a property tax in ways that actually have been addressed in legal matters previously. I won't bore you with the details. The fee is one that is directly based on the runoff from the property, maybe not down to the exact number of droplets, but we use a proxy in the form of an ERU that is a measure of what the runoff would be, and then create categories of the properties that are different levels within that fee structure. It doesn't have any relationship to the value of the property. It has a relationship to the amount of runoff, which again is another reason why it was viewed by the majority of the council to be a more logical and equitable way to go about raising money to pay for mandatory stormwater maintenance and infrastructure costs. But the consequence of shifting from a property tax-based system, which initially we had proposed to do it only partially, then phase it in, but then ultimately shifted all of the obligations from a property tax-based system to a fee-based system, is that it is spread out amongst more properties, which on the one hand would seem to be a good thing and more equitable, more egalitarian, but the consequence is that it does pick up properties that previously were not contributing monetarily into that system. That was one of the trade-offs. There are some other trade-offs. It's not a perfect approach by any means. It was what was ultimately determined to be the superior choice amongst the choices that we were faced with. The concept itself has been under discussion and analysis for over a decade. It's not something that we did lightly or without a lot of research and public input and outreach, and I know that we did reach out to all the not-for-profits as much as we could in the year or so leading up to to do this. And so we have heard a lot of input, both pro and con, on this concept from various segments of the community and are very aware of that. Now, of course, is exactly what we predicted would happen is when the bills came out, we would really hear what people had to think, and so this is exactly what we were kind of expecting. So thank you for coming here and expressing your views. It is moving forward. We've only just started it. Whether there may be adjustments, tweaks, and modifications, it's premature to say, because we're literally just putting this into place, and so I think it would be premature at best to talk about how it might be refined going forward, but that doesn't mean that there aren't possibilities where that might occur. So I don't mean to sound vague, but it's too early to really get down to much detail, but please continue to participate in the dialogue with us. We would welcome it. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from any members of the audience? Questions or comments with respect to matters not appearing on our agenda tonight? Hearing none further, item 5 on our agenda is with respect to public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight. We will move to item 6, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the Village Council? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. It brings us to item 7, which is our active agenda. And we have one item on our active agenda tonight, 7A. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use to permit a preschool facility at 6600 Fairview Avenue in the Village of Downers Grove?
Mayor Tully, I move to adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use to permit a preschool facility at 6600 Fairview Avenue as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? Questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The single active agenda item passes unanimously. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which is our first reading or the workshop segment of our meeting, where we have items presented for discussion and possible action at a later point in time. We have 2 items on our first reading or workshop agenda. And as is customary, I typically turn the microphone over to staff for a presentation of these items.
And I will quickly turn it over to our Community Development Director, Tom Dabereiner, as both of these items are grant applications under the OASIS program. Tom.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good
Consequently, for the purposes of the presentation, we'll be considering, at least for the presentation, both of the next 2 items on the agenda as if they were one. We've all seen this slide before, several times before, so I'm not going to really run through it significantly, but for those who may be new to the program, in response to a request from property owners and business people along Ogden Avenue, Village Council adopted the OASIS matching grant program in September of 2010 and amended it just last August. The goals of the program have remained the same throughout, and they're based on the 1999 Ogden Avenue Master Plan. That's the TIF district within which properties are eligible for the participation in the grant program. There have been 6 submittal deadlines now, the most recent one in December of last year. 3 projects, there were 3 applications, 3 projects were reviewed. 2 applications are recommended and before you tonight for a first reading. Let's see here. There is a map again outlining the TIF area and then the projects in yellow that have come before the council in the past. And there are 2 new ones here. The first is the Dunkin' Donuts site at 522 Ogden. I will highlight the next one in a little bit, but the Dunkin' Donuts project would be really a complete site rehabilitation, including a new facade, landscaping, garbage enclosures, and the installation of new signage. Primary benefit, of course, is the comprehensive site improvement and a building update. which is certainly needed there. The total cost of the exterior improvements would be just over $161,000. The remodeling project would also be inside. That's not eligible, but this is a complete rehab inside and outside. Only the external items would be eligible for the grant. This does max out the grant amount. Where there's a cap of $100,000, and we do max that out with the recommendation here. We are recommending $100,000 for that particular property. That's the site. Currently an aerial for the site. You can see a little bit of green along Ogden Avenue towards the bottom of the building there. Outside of that, there's not too much. In the future, there would be a little bit more added along the rear, some improved landscaping up front, including some trees. So certainly an improvement there. The building itself is, this is the existing building. The franchisee is making these improvements. It would look something like that in the future. And then these are the elevations on all four sides. Certainly an improvement over the building that's there. And it includes the monument sign, which is a little hard to see. So I apologize for that. It would be a legal sign in the future. We'll have to make that clear. The second project that we're highlighting tonight and eligible for the grant is at 946 Ogden Avenue, located right there in the middle of the TIF district. Here again, we've got a facade improvement, some landscaping, and installation of new signs. It would improve the property's appearance, which was one of the goals coming out of the Ogden Avenue Master Plan from 1999. Total costs here are almost $139,000. And the recommended grant amount is almost $87,000, $86,775. It's not quite 75%. There are some items that were taken out. The trigger for funding the landscaping really wasn't met, although they are adding some. And then they are repaving the parking lot as well. Not really repaving, not really an eligible item. So that's a little bit less than the 75% that you might have expected to see. Here is the site, or the aerial again. Oops, that went really fast, didn't it? Here's the existing building, rather plain facade today. In the future, I wish this was in color, but it's a much more modern looking building, better looking building in the future. Be happy to answer any questions. I know we have at least one of the grant applicants here who's also eligible, or also available to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dabereiner. Are there any questions from any members of the audience with respect to the OASIS grants? OASIS sounds very tropical. It's a nice thing to think about in January. Questions from the council? Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be supporting both of these. I just want to compliment those that are come before us. You know, when we voted on this, at least when I did, this was actually what I had envisioned, that it would be great. It would be greater projects than just landscaping or sign replacements or whatever, to see their total remodel of the Dunkin' Donuts. And I'm familiar with that location because it's on the way to the office, so it's easy. But yeah, I mean, that definitely was one that I was starting to wonder if it was going to get remodeled or what the plans were. But to see it come through, and both of them kind of seem like they're in the same kind of architectural style, that little Frank Lloyd Wrightish, and I'll probably have the architect experts tell me I was wrong with that analysis, but it's great. I mean, that's exactly what I envisioned, and I probably was speaking on behalf of my colleagues with that. So, you know, this is great. So, job well done. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. Tom, could you go back to that first, you don't have to go back. Did you say $750,000 is what we had available?
As an annual budget item.
Annual budget item.
Correct.
Just for clarification, in the 2013 budget, that number was dropped to $250,000 because we've been spending less than that in the first 2 years of the program.
Right, that's 750. That's wrong, because that was from the first year, and we had not spent that.
I'm not there, I'm not at the same point yet that Commissioner Durkin is at. We've made a couple of changes to this in my time up here, I think first implementation and then some revisions to this plan. And I was looking back through my notes at some of the changes we've made and some of the thoughts I had at the time. And this is an idea which I like, because I like the idea of trying to put more sort of TIF money into play in Ogden Avenue to try and actually get some of the changes we were chasing when we thought of a master plan and instituted a TIF. I think that's a good thing. One of my concerns back when we made this change, which I agreed to because I'm trying to find a way to evolve this thing forward and land at a spot I'm comfortable with, I'm not there yet, is the size, dollar-wise, of these individual projects. If we look back at the list of 2010 through 2012 OASIS grants, obviously not all of them have come to fruition, but these things, you know, the start, I think my first comments where I was getting nervous were the ALEN project, but if you take ALEN and these two, they are substantially different than the bulk of the rest of them in terms of size, and I'm not yet comfortable, and I don't know, maybe my colleagues can get me there, maybe our staff can get me there, public certainly is welcome to chime in, but the amount of money that we're spending out of TIF on the private side of these parcels. This sidewalk signage, parkway, green space is in my mind the driver for TIF. And we talked about enhancing some of the abilities to pay for some signs, if that would sort of act as kind of a trigger, if you will. And I'm for that. I think that's a good thing to spur things. But in these cases now, we are, you know, essentially rebuilding or in a large way rebuilding private property pieces with TIF dollars, and that doesn't feel to me quite like what the intention of the TIF was. In these cases, we're not doing any lot consolidations to help us with our lot size problems on Ogden Avenue. We're not doing curb cut eliminations. We're not in any reasonable way increasing green space. In my mind, there's just a lot of public improvement that's missing from these. So I don't know, I'm kind of talking in a circle and probably not telling anybody anything they don't know already about my thoughts on this, but the three projects since we've evolved this, ALEN and now these two, in my mind, are reinforcing the problems that I had that kind of come into fruition. Some of the concerns I had about larger project dollar signs coming to fruition. In this case, with $250,000, we're basically spending it on two jobs and getting very little public improvement out of it. So maybe my colleagues can talk me into thinking this is a good idea. I'm not there yet.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell?
Just a couple of comments. I think one of the benefits of the broader OASIS grant program is that it helps to revitalize Ogden Avenue. And in the cases where ALEN and these two, it's taking buildings that could become eyesores and could become blight on Ogden Avenue, and it's helping to revitalize them and make them something that will improve the site, the drivability in the site along Ogden Avenue. To me, that's a good use and a good investment of TIF dollars, because TIFs are normally used in areas that are somewhat blighted or have a need to be revitalized. And if that's the intention of a TIF and that's why you can collect TIF dollars, then the reinvestment of those dollars in situations like this where Dunkin' Donuts is a thriving business, the building's just old. And allowing it to become a more modern structure that can enhance the appearance of Ogden Avenue, I think is a benefit to the whole community. And in that respect, Bob, I think it is a good use of those funds. I agree in that I would definitely like to see public improvements. I know we've had some sidewalks included in these things. We've had some easements for sidewalks. We've had additional green space. I'd always like to see additional green space. And somehow with the lot sizes on Ogden Avenue, that becomes extremely difficult. And even if there is green space, the maintenance of that green space sometimes becomes problematic. So I agree that this is something that we need to watch, and that's obviously why we approve each grant individually. But from my perspective, at least looking at the work that's been done along Ogden Avenue, the amount of signs that have been brought into compliance, the amount of green space that's around those signs, some of the public improvements that we've gotten as far as the sidewalks, or at least easements to the sidewalks, has, I think, helped us to eventually have connectivity on Ogden Avenue. So from that perspective, I agree with a lot of the comments that Commissioner Durkin made, but I also agree with some of the comments that Commissioner Barnett made, and I think as we move along, and this is probably more for Michael unless he talks to businesses, as we move along, I think we need to try to get as much green space, and you need to get sidewalks, and we need to get some of those public improvements that Commissioner Barnett's talking about. So again, so that there is an enhancement of how Ogden Avenue looks as we go along. I think we're getting there. Are we there yet? Not totally. There has been some disappointments along the road for me with some of the projects that have been done, because I think there's a lot of busyness and I don't want to say cheap signs, but cheap selling signs that have cropped up on some of the businesses where we've invested money. But in general, the appearance of Ogden Avenue is coming along. It's got a long way to go, but I think it's getting there. So I see benefits to this. And as I said, the intention of TIF money is to help areas that are blighted, quote unquote, or need help, then this obviously is an advantage to that. So, but I still would like to see more sidewalks and more green space and more aesthetics put into some of these grants if at all possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
I wanted to thank staff for answering all my questions. One of the questions I asked was when we're dealing with a franchisee such as Dunkin' Donuts, if they're eligible for co-op funding for signage. And your notes said that they weren't, but maybe that's something we should include in the application going forward. I would leave it up to staff to draft that, but just to make sure that these businesses aren't getting money from their corporations for updating their logos and their signage, as well as getting money from the TIF. So that would be my only comment, but I've been a fan of the OASIS program, and I'm thrilled to see these new projects coming forward. I think it will change the look of Ogden Avenue, and that's the purpose. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. Oddly enough, I agree with everything that everybody said so far. I read the two projects, and the amount of money involved, my jaw dropped. And the amount of money that we're throwing in on private business. But then that's what the TIF district was set up to do, was to improve business, to improve the look by improving one business, hopefully improving other neighboring businesses and all up and down Ogden Avenue, and so there's a value to the program. But this just seems like one heck of a lot of money, where we're throwing more money into a project than the owner is. So it meets the qualifications. I mean, you know, I read through everything, and it matches the program that we currently have. So as uncomfortable as I am in improving these amounts of money, that's the way the program is. And I think what we can do is actually change the program. To tail off what Commissioner Rankin said, one thing that I don't think we allow in the OASIS program is startup costs. Or if you're having a one type of business and you're converting it to another type of business, you know, there are costs. For example, if you're changing a retail store to a restaurant, you have venting and all these other structural things that need to be done in order to open that business. We shouldn't be funding those structural changes. That's those startup costs that would be necessary. And Commissioner Rankin mentioned franchises. Bad example maybe would be if McDonald's decided to dump the golden arches and go with something else. Are we supposed to fund those types of changes as well? And I think not. If we do, maybe it's something else that we need to address in the OASIS program, that we don't do startup costs and we don't do things that franchises would require a business to do, whether whether a Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, muffler shop, anything. If they're required to do it by their franchise, we shouldn't have to pick up the bill for that. What we should be funding is totally optional, things that would normally not get done for that particular business, namely the sidewalks, the green space, the improved facade, and to some extent I had some problems with signage, but we have what we have. So I will be supporting this only because it matches the program as is. Hopefully we can make some adjustments to the OASIS program in general to address some of the other concerns that were brought up, maybe even changing the maximum dollar amounts. That's all I got, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in too. I agree with Commissioner Waldeck that these do meet the requirements for the program as it is now. I'll be supporting them as well, but I think the interesting point is that we're hearing about the program can be amended. You know, anytime this group can say, hey, let's talk about OASIS and amend the program. We just did that not too long ago. It puts a lot of work on staff. It might be one of those wonderful action item things that we talk about later in the year, but for now, these 2 projects are going to enhance the appearance of Ogden Avenue, and they're going to be better for vehicle transportation around the site. I'm trying to find the actual bullets that Tom talked about earlier. Improve existing building appearance and signage. So, I mean, they follow through with the main tenets of what we're asking the OASIS program to do. So, I appreciate the work that's gone into it. I think that one of the connections from the OASIS program is the beautification of Ogden Avenue through the buildings and the greenscape, but also to show the business community that this village is business friendly and we are open to opportunities for new business and existing businesses to grow, which is the attraction and retention that our EDC and Chamber and Downtown Management so often talk about. So I'll be in support of these 2 grant applications. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, my comments I'll break into 2 categories. One will be from the perspective of the petitioner and staff, and then the other category will be comments from the perspective of the village council, because one has to do with meeting the requirements as set out and advertised for the program, and the other one has to do with the policy behind the program in the first place. From the perspective of the petitioner, I think it's been said by a number of my colleagues that the requirements for the program have been met, and that's what's before us right now. It's kind of hard to say that these shouldn't be approved if they meet the qualifications that, as Commissioner Neustadt laid out, we all approved not that long ago. People submitted applications based on those criteria, so we shouldn't be surprised now that the criteria are actually being implemented in the way that was approved as part of the policy. So from that standpoint, I think it's hard to argue. On a more macro level, however, like the policy discussion is entirely appropriate as long as we don't make changes after people have relied upon our prior advertisements as to what the program was. If we're going to make a policy change, then we got to announce that so that people know what to expect, and they're not pursuing grants that no longer exist or could be taken away, or once we see the manifestation, we suddenly decide, well, I don't like the policy after all. Not that policy can't be revised, because candidly, I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Barnett said. Let's go back in time here. Now I'm coming from the policy perspective. When the Ogden Avenue TIF was created, it was not created with the OASIS program in mind. I guarantee you that. The OASIS program wasn't even thought of when the Ogden Avenue TIF was put into place. That's Tax Increment Financing District, by the way. Candidly, the purpose of that was to revitalize Ogden Avenue consistent with the goals of the Ogden Avenue Master Plan. And those were much bigger ticket items, as Commissioner Barnett said, than some of the things that we have seen with the OASIS program. No disrespect to the OASIS program, and no disrespect to all those who worked very hard to put that program together and to bring these proposals forward, and the petitioners who improved their facades and so on and so forth. No disrespect to any of those folks. But the real goal of this was to address things such as lot consolidation, so that Ogden Avenue, which was called Old Plank Road for a reason, could support modern development. We have very shallow, small lots there. People ask, why don't we have big boxes and other uses on Ogden Avenue? Because the lots don't support it in most cases. So that means you have to do things like consolidate lots. It means you have to go into residential neighborhoods. It means you have to put things in like road improvements, sidewalks. You have to deal with stormwater detention. Sometimes you have to put in traffic lights. These things can be very expensive and they can deter redevelopment. And so what we end up with, more of the same uses over and over again. And so when this council hears anecdotally from residents all the time, why don't you bring X to Ogden Avenue? Why don't you bring Y to Ogden Avenue? Because Ogden Avenue was developed pre-zoning ordinance, back when people had horses and wagons, and it doesn't support, in many cases, modern development that we now expect. And so the TIF district was put in part to try to bring Ogden Avenue along to where it would support those kind of developments, the kind of uses that we hear residents asking for all the time. And that, again, may mean a lot of very expensive things that you may not get unless you provide incentives or some easing of the pain in order for them to happen. So we wanted to have a tax increment financing district that would generate funds through the increment within that district from redevelopment that could then be reinvested in Ogden Avenue for things like lot consolidation, stormwater detention, stoplights, sidewalks, many other examples could be used, and also where it made sense to provide incentives. We're always very happy when we have car dealerships locate to Ogden Avenue because they generate a lot of sales tax dollars. A lot of sales tax dollars help keep down property taxes, which everybody likes. But sometimes you need to be able to incentivize someone to come and do that in your town as opposed to some other town where maybe they don't have the challenges that our Ogden Avenue stretch does. And so we want to have those dollars in reserve in order to do that. So from that perspective, the OASIS program isn't exactly consistent with the larger original goals of the Ogden Avenue TIF, in my opinion. But the history is that the dollars were being generated in the increment, and we weren't seeing those big opportunities come forward, and the dollars were there, so a very innovative, intrepid group of folks said, well, what can we be doing in the meantime? Thus, the OASIS program was born. And yes, the criteria and the requirements have been tweaked over time, but it's still on a smaller scale, achieving, I think, in some way, the goals of the Ogden Avenue Master Plan, which is improvement of the aesthetics and public improvements along Ogden Avenue. And one can debate whether a particular project has enough public improvements or not. And if we don't think it's enough or too much money is being spent on the private aspects as opposed to the public aspects, then we got to change the program or something else. That, I would entertain that conversation absolutely. Because I do think we need to be able to leap on those opportunities for the much larger redevelopment opportunities that I think we originally contemplated when this was put in. And that's not to say that I think OASIS is draining our ability to do that, but I think we need to be mindful of it. So in sum, I think the policy discussion, which is not what Mr. Dabereiner was presenting to us tonight, but rather two petitions that by all measures meet the criteria that has been established for them. If we're now seeing manifestations of it that we think warrants a policy change, then we ought to have a discussion about changing the policy. And Mr. Casa from the Economic Development Corporation is brave enough to raise his hand and come up to the podium and speak to this issue.
Thank you. Michael Casa, Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, 2001 Butterfield Road, Suite 120 in Downers Grove. Back in the summer when the council was considering changes to the OASIS program, there were some that thought that the changes would have a chilling effect on applications. The reverse has happened. I agree with everything that's been said. I do believe that the majority of the TIF dollars should be used for redevelopment opportunities. At the same time, we can have an OASIS program in which funds are used for the betterment of the Ogden Avenue corridor, specifically to make the corridor more attractive. It's important that if there are going to be any changes to the program, that those be considered, because as the mayor has indicated, we're out there promoting this program with the criteria you did adopt. We're developing a 4-color direct mail piece that's going to be going out to property owners on Ogden Avenue promoting the program. When I talk to commercial brokers and developers about Ogden Avenue, there's one consistent theme I hear from almost every one of them, And that is, when they talk to prospective tenants who want to look at Ogden, their biggest concern is what the sum of the buildings that will be their neighbors, what those buildings look like, whether they're occupied or not. So when a new car dealer or a new business or redevelopment of an existing building does happen, that does have a great impact. A developer will come in and they'll bring a tenant to come take a look at, I'm thinking about redoing this building or building on this site. You're going to be my tenant. What do you think? And the tenant looks around. And so every time a building, however it was funded, however it was paid for, whenever a building is redeveloped or improved, it helps the overall picture. So I don't hear about traffic patterns and income levels and housing. The consistent theme is let's get as much as possible these buildings to look the way we want them to look. That will have, in my opinion, the biggest impact on getting those redevelopment projects that we all want to come in. And I'm hoping one day to bring you a project where you can say, we're going to commit large amounts of TIF dollars to this redevelopment.
We'd like it to come without that, but.
Yes. Let me just, a final note.
We have tools in our toolbox.
When you, on an annual basis, come up with a dollar amount you put in your budget for TIF, for the OASIS program, the idea would be that we get so many applications that you then say, we can really afford to approve 3 out of the 10 that we received, and we're going to pick the best 3 that have some of the components that you've all spoken about. That's, to me, the idea, that because in the past we haven't done that. We've taken the applications as they come and they've generally been approved. Let's make it competitive. So I support the new criteria that was developed. The EDC is a big supporter of it. I'm part of the OASIS team. I'd like to see projects on Ogden that you want to use OASIS dollars compete for what's a limited amount of money that you've set aside in your budget. So I think you can do both the TIF dollars for redevelopment as well as support the OASIS program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Castle. Other questions, comments? Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. I certainly can tell where my colleagues are on this. But as I look through the OASIS program, much of what's out there that we've set out of these criteria that we've advertised are pretty subjective. And there's no, I mean, they say you can do some of this or some of that or some of this or some of that. We may grant money. And we just have jobs here, too, in front of us that are, you know, I mean, Commissioner Waldeck pointed out we're going to spend as much as the owner is on the building itself, or more. We do have, I think, a logical and reasonable desire long-term to spur redevelopment. I'm not sure that we should be doing it as much as trying to spur it. And these 2 projects in particular, there are no, other than the aesthetics, there are no public benefits. There's no more green space. They've got sidewalks. There's no curb cuts. There's no stormwater improvements. So I guess I'll stop because I'm clearly on the short end of this stick for the evening. But Mayor, I'll take you up on it, and we'll talk later about after these are past us about whether or not we ought to adjust the criteria yet again. This is kind of the concern I had, and I'm feeling a little bit like it's come true.
You're right. I mean, we had this conversation before, and it's come up periodically as, you know, what is the goal of the OASIS program? What is the end game? What is the result? And periodically, we have differences of opinion as to what the end result ought to be. I tend to agree with you that I think those dollars are there to not do what the private sector can do, but to entice the private sector to do something that they might not otherwise do to our benefit. To repeat my old adage, people often ask, why are we giving incentives to a thriving business? Because we want them to thrive in our community, and I often will say that 50% of something is a heck of a lot better than 100% of nothing. If a car dealership relocates somewhere else, we're getting 0. If we can entice them to come to Downers Grove and generate millions and millions of dollars of revenue, and we have some arrangement where we get we have to give a percentage of that back to them, we have something to the net good. But that's, to me, oftentimes the criteria. Will this happen anyway, or will this only happen because we reached into our toolbox of economic development and utilized something that brought an opportunity to Downers Grove that gave us that incremental benefit that we wouldn't otherwise have had, but for our ability to be flexible and creative and innovative? That's really, to me, where these tools are most effective. Now, similarly, I can see that pan out in the context of some of the public improvements along Ogden Avenue, eliminating curb cuts, increasing green space, adding sidewalks. Those are stated goals and have been for a long time in the Ogden Avenue Master Plan. And so if we can spur a private business to, as part of another project, also include public components that they otherwise wouldn't have to, that again, I think, is something that is worth looking at. But how we tweak that and balance that, I'm certainly open to looking at it. And I know that may completely ruin the trifold color prints, but but I think it's a legitimate topic of conversation. Is what is the best public benefit that we can achieve from these limited dollars? And it's not to do something that the private sector otherwise could or should be doing. It's to partner with the private sector to accomplish something that, left alone, neither one of us would have happened, but together we can, to our mutual benefit. So you can put that on the last page of the brochure. Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, how many more of these, how many applicants do we have lined up following the two that we're talking about tonight? Do we know how many we have? Is there some in review or in the process of becoming reviewed or submitted?
We had 3 submitted with this deadline, which is a competitive process, and we don't have any for the next deadline yet, but we can inform the council when we get the next round for the next deadline.
Do we know when the next deadline is?
I think we do. April 1st.
So do we want to, if there is a concern, I mean, I don't want people to submit and then all of a sudden we go to the table and say, let's review this. And then all of a sudden it's, I don't want to waste time, people's money, our time, staff's time, printing costs, whatever you talk about.
I would echo Commissioner Durkin's comments. This is the first round of applications since the changes were made just a couple of months ago. And we achieved exactly the policy that we as a team were on.
Which was to get more applications.
Get more applications, get more public dollars and less local match, and we got exactly that. So our recommendation is to proceed on the votes on these. And then if, now that you've seen a couple, it doesn't exactly match what we're looking for, let's make some changes again before the next deadline. We can also extend the next deadline, so there's no magic to the April 1st date.
And I think that's really important because, I don't want to say above all, but a key issue is to manage expectations that the people who put in to this program, pursue this program, we don't want to lead anybody down the primrose path. If they see the program as advertised, they submit, then they meet the criteria, then they ought to have the benefits of it. And again, I always apologize to petitioners that come here on a very narrow issue and we end up having a big policy debate, but sometimes that happens.
It's a workshop.
It's the fine print on the application that you may be subjected to a 2-hour policy discussion by the village council. Other comments either on the narrow issue or the broader issue?
Well, I just want to point out, I mean, I think we need to give staff a direction here, because if we're going to be, like Commissioner, one of us just said, and I can't remember who was on that side of the table, being business friendly and encouraging redevelopment, and we have staff, we have volunteers out promoting this OASIS program. I don't want anyone that is thinking about submitting, hearing this council meeting, 2 applicants in the audience saying, wow, I mean.
They're pulling the rug out.
No kidding, and that's not really who we are. And if we're going to do it, I don't want to be misleading anyone. I mean, either stop it after next week's vote and talk about it, or just continue down the road until maybe after the next council is seated and talk about it then.
Well, I don't think anyone's necessarily suggesting eliminating the program. I think what Commissioner Barnett and maybe Commissioner Waldeck were getting at is you think of things in the abstract, and then you see them in the concrete, no pun intended, and you somehow now have a different idea of what the policy should be that shapes the outcome. I think that's all we're talking about.
Well,
I do understand that, but the general public,
that happens
the
all the
business
time.
on Ogden that may want to do this is maybe like, hey, wait a minute, I don't know,
I think Sean's point is right. I mean, we do have to be clearer probably than certainly I've caused us to be this evening. But Commissioner Waldeck's point and my point, I think I'll try and speak for both of us a little bit. But now that we've seen it,
That might be a first.
Yeah, no kidding.
well, it's not as rare as some folks might think. But now that we've seen it, as I recall, the bulk of the discussions that we had when we made this change were, let's get more of the TIF money into play. And then there was a lot of debate internally amongst us that really focused around should we or should we not pay for signs, and if we were, under what conditions. And there's nothing wrong with that debate. I mean, this is all eyes wide open by all of us. But now we've seen a couple of them, and there's this element that we didn't talk about at all. What do we get if an application has like no public improvements? You know, what do we get if two applications take up 80% of the budgeted money? Some of those things weren't part of those discussions that are now sort of obvious to us that at least they weren't talked about. So, I mean, I think Sean's right. I certainly agree. I don't want to pull a rug out or be misleading anybody, but I think we've learned something that we didn't know when we made this adjustment. And there's no evidence, with all due respect to everybody trying to do the right thing, because I really think we are, there's no evidence that this council, tonight's conversation included, is somehow in the role of being anti-redevelopment or anti-business or not trying to be helping anyone. That's not anybody's intention, I don't think. So I agree with Sean. My 2 cents on next week would be to try and have a conversation about it sooner rather than later, because I would like to suggest there be some adjustments.
If there, I think all of us, even though we're in favor of this because it meets the criteria, I think there's concerns on the part of everybody up here. If that's the case, then we need to go forward with these, because obviously they've been presented. But
They're out there sweating bullets right now.
But I would not want to see another round come forward on April 1st until we can perhaps expand this discussion and either tweak it or decide perhaps where we want to go with this. So if there is a way to, and obviously there is a way, to make that April 1st deadline perhaps a June 1st deadline, and allow for a broader discussion of this issue and to tweak it, or not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but to somehow come up with and address some of the concerns I think many of us have, then I think that would be beneficial, and it would not, I don't think, send the wrong message to the business community, because obviously we're trying to get public improvements, in here too. So I would be in favor of postponing the next round until May 1st, probably June 1st. But, and then between now and then, try to have another discussion similar to what we're having this evening to figure out how we can tweak this to further the goals of what we've said are our goals.
Right. Well, and just to go to the scenario that Mr. Casa described, if we had 25 of these in front of us and we could only choose 3, then all these conversations would be entirely appropriate, because Commissioner Barnett would look at them and say, well, this one's got this, this, and this, I want this one, and this one has that, and then we wouldn't have this problem. The challenge has been that in the past, part of these changes were done to spur applications, so we got exactly what we asked for.
Yeah, we sure did. We got good applications.
Well, and by the way, just as a quick digression, notice that no one has said that either one of these projects aren't going to be great improvements. They're lovely buildings, and it's nothing to do with the petitioners. We are seriously having a policy discussion up here at your expense. So I will apologize.
You exposed a gray area.
Once again. But I think that if we had 3 slots and 25 applications, then a lot of these issues would end up falling by the wayside, because everyone would look and say, well, this one meets it the most, this one achieves the public-private partnership the best, and you'd go forward like that. But when we only have 2 so far, that's what happens. Commissioner Rankin.
I just wanted to add that I think we should halt it, only because if someone is interested in applying, they have to do architectural drawings, and that's a real expense to these people. And so if it seems that that's the trend, I think we should consider that.
Let me get a little bit more than Commissioner said. I'm sensing that we need a little bit more structure around this idea before we give any direction.
Well, there's, we had some good policy direction last June and August.
So you thought.
And we moved it a little bit, and I think there might be some middle ground, and I think the issues that have come up might be putting the program between what it was 6 months ago and what it is right now. So that's the direction we're hearing, and we had a great process with our OASIS team just a couple of months ago. We can go back, revisit that same process. It doesn't take too long, and we can present some ideas to the council in the coming months.
Commissioner Newstead?
That was kind of my idea that Dave just laid out, but should we take the next couple of weeks, since we're off, and go through our official new business process that we've been using well, and have one of the council members propose the new business item that he or she may want to bring up and have some actual items that are in the new business conversation to allow for direction for staff.
Yeah, but do we need to do that if
Well, that's
we
why I'm asking.
collectively up
I mean,
here
we've-
said yes, that
Yeah.
we should look at it?
That's our kind of process that we've been following for the last number of weeks.
I think if Bob would want to have done this, it would have been by him, but since we're talking about it here, I think we can bypass that.
Well, I think
Unless
that's
you
up to
wanna
the-
Well, I would be open to a recommendation from staff as to the structure by which to best pursue this, because it does sound like we have a little bit of a Goldilocks problem.
We're looking for that
It's too
just
cold, it's
right.
too hot, and we want to get just right.
I think we have some good direction just based on the reaction to the actual applications, which clearly meet the current criteria. So we will, after the vote takes place, we'll come back with some new ideas that fit maybe in that just right category.
Any other comments? Questions? Mr. Cass and Mr. Daberheiner?
I just wanted to say that the April 1st deadline has not been published or sent to anyone, so it's not a problem at all.
Okay.
I know none of the petitioners dare to get up and say anything at this point. But you're always welcome. Hearing no other comments, then moves us to item 9.
That ends our first reading, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That brings us to item 9, which is the mayor's report. I have no report this evening. It brings us to item 10, the manager's report. And we heard a little bit about the stormwater utility earlier tonight in a different context, and now we have an update as to where that program currently stands in its implementation phase.
Thank you, Mayor. We have the first monthly report on the brand-new stormwater utility. And here to give the first report is our Communications Director, Doug Kozlowski.
Good evening, Mr. Kozlowski, the voice of Downers Grove.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to be here with you tonight to speak with you about the implementation of the stormwater utility. And here are just a few of the key points that I'll be emphasizing for you this evening. The utility was launched on time. Our engagement efforts were successful. The initial financial numbers are in line with the budget and expectations. Adjustments have already been made to effectively manage the utility based on the customer feedback that we have received, and to also let you know, as Manager Fielman just did, that we do intend on providing you with monthly reports on the progress of the utility. Just by way of background, as you know, that in August of 2012, the stormwater utility was approved, and it was implemented in January of this year. This is the result of a multi-year effort that meets the village's long-range financial plan and strategic plan goals of providing sustainable funding for infrastructure development and improvements. As we've also heard this evening, there are many benefits associated with the fee-based system that we have. But most importantly, all the properties now share in the cost of the system, and the monthly fees provide the predictable funding source needed to operate and maintain that system. The system also encourages users and customers to reduce the runoff from their property, and those customers may also be eligible for credits and incentives. And in short, just to be clear, the fees are based on the impervious area of each property, which are the surfaces that don't absorb water. Those surfaces like roofs and driveways and patios. Now, I'm also very happy to tell you that the launch of the utility was preceded by an extensive outreach campaign that stretched across 14 communication platforms, using Facebook, Twitter, the village website, the Hometown Times, the Village Corner, billing inserts, online advertising, and of course the community-wide notification system listed here. We have created over 250,000 stormwater utility messaging opportunities. Now, based on the calls we received so far, we've estimated that just around 5% of those people that have called and emailed have indicated that they had not heard about the stormwater utility. And that is a great indication of the effectiveness of the outreach and engagement strategy that we employed. But wait, there's more.
If you order now.
There's more because the major elements of the stormwater utility program have also gone according to plan. The amount billed as well as the number of credits and incentives issued are consistent with the budget and expectations. So as you see here, we have to date 44 incentives granted in the amount of $3,200. There have been 3 credits issued, one each to District 58, the Downers Grove Park District, and the Downers Grove Sanitary District. And at this time, there is 1 appeal scheduled to be heard by the Stormwater Floodplain and Oversight Committee in February. And without saying, we have received a good deal of initial feedback since launching the program, and several of the customers we've talked to have asked for clarification regarding the difference between impervious surface and the square footage of their home, in addition to commenting or asking why green space is not given more consideration in the calculations. We've also heard from several businesses that are tenants in multi-tenant commercial buildings that express concern about how the cost for common areas, such as parking lots, are billed. And actually, I'm very happy to report that we have adjusted quickly to address these issues by making changes to our website that highlight that the fee calculations are based on impervious area and not just the square footage of your house or the primary structure. And they are not based on the amount of green space on the property either. In response to the billing concerns that we've heard from the business community, we've adjusted the way we bill multi-tenant commercial buildings by sending the entire stormwater fee to the property owner rather than the utility bill customer. And this allows the owners and tenants to decide how the fee is actually apportioned. And again, that's based on the direct feedback we've heard since we've launched in January. So I really want to let you know, and in summary, you've also heard some of these things this evening, that the utility was launched on time. The engagement and outreach effort was successful, and the initial financial numbers are in line with the budget and expectations. And we've also made adjustments and will continue to do so to effectively manage the utility based on the customer feedback we receive. And I look forward to providing you with additional information in the coming months as we progress with the utility. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
And that was an important message from the village of Downers Grove.
And I'm Doug Kozlowski.
Thank you, Mr. Kozlowski.
You're very welcome.
Before opening up to questions on the manager's report topic, I just want to commend you and everyone at staff for a tremendous outreach program, campaign, if you will, that's been ongoing for some time. And regardless of what the reaction was at the other end of the phone or the tweet or the email or whatnot, truly a unparalleled, exceptional outreach program. Whether like it, love it, or leave it, everyone, more or less, unless you've been in Antarctica, knows about this program. So thank you for your efforts in making that a reality. Questions, comments from the council? Mr. Schnell?
Just a comment. One of the things that we said from the very beginning was this would either rise or fall with an education program that, you know, enabled our residents to understand what we were doing it, why we were doing it. And I just want to commend staff because they actually went well beyond expectations as far as the educational program has been phenomenal. And as the mayor said, you know, people may not like it, but they know about it. And that's important because the more you can educate them, and hopefully we'll continue to educate them as to what this is doing and why it's happening, the better off we're going to be. So I commend you and I commend all of the staff for doing a really bang-up job as far as educating the public as to why we have a stormwater utility and what the bill means and what it looks like and all those wonderful things that go with it. So.
I just want to point out that not all the reactions are negative.
No.
We also get reactions that say, this makes a lot of sense, I support this, I realize you got to pay for these things, this is a more equitable way to do it. I mean, we've gotten a whole spectrum of responses. It's not just I don't like it, sometimes it's I understand it, I get it, but would you change this or that? We've gotten all different sorts of voices And that's really the important thing, is that our residents were made aware of it, and we've received their input, not just since implementation, but bears repeating, far before the decision was ever made to even implement this. There was a tremendous outreach campaign, and a tremendous amount of input was obtained, once again reflecting a broad spectrum of opinions. Other comments, questions from members of the council? Commissioner Rankin?
Can you refresh my memory? What was the cap for the credits and incentives? And I think it was 3,300 that we're at, or
Yes.
something like that. Do you
Just a
recall?
quick overview of the stormwater utility budget found in the stormwater fund on our FY13 budget, which is available on our website. We had projected net revenues of 3.3 million. We had gross revenues of 3.5. And the numbers you asked about, Commissioner, $20,000 maximum for incentives, and we're at about, I think it was around 3,000, 3,400 in the report, somewhere around there, and $180,000 for the credits. And it's early, but it appears to be tracking about what we thought. And since we'll provide monthly updates, if we ever get close to those numbers, we will, again, probably revisit a key policy about this program.
Great, thanks.
Just
Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you. So with all the efforts we had for months, and paper, emails, Doug calling up during dinner time, we now have a benchmark that if we put the pedal to the metal and publicize something, there's going to be about 5% of the population that doesn't have a clue. And I don't know, maybe when we talk about doing publicity for other efforts, you know, it sets a benchmark. So we already know 5%, no matter what we do, is not going to be aware of anything. And I just wonder if somewhere along the line we can get a feeling for how, I mean, everybody knows that they get the bill in the mail, it's a stormwater utility, they got to pay it. I'm just wondering what percentage of that actually understands credits and that type of a process, or are they just going to open up their mail, you know, here it comes, I owe it, I pay it, but they aren't really knowledgeable in the credit department.
Yeah, the vast majority of our customers really are eligible more for the incentives, and I sit right outside of our call take area, and I can hear dozens of conversations per day about clarifying how you would receive incentives. Our call takers do a tremendous job explaining the program, and it appears just anecdotally that the vast majority of people understand the program, how it's structured, and how they can reduce their bill through incentives. The credits are really structured more for large properties, which tend to be commercial properties, and our stormwater administrator has had many conversations with most of those key property owners. I would say that the majority of those property owners are busy doing some engineering study to find out what their credit would be and what their next steps might be, and if they wish to pursue those credits. So all in all, I think in general, great understanding of the program. The commercial properties will probably take 90 days or so to really do the analysis and then come forward with their application.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We don't normally do this, but given what we just said about outreach in the community, if there are any questions or comments on the manager's report subject from any members of the audience, I'd be happy to entertain them. Very good. Well, thank you for the report.
That ends our report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kozlowski.
You're welcome.
That brings us to item 11, our attorney's report.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you. And that brings us then to item 12, councilman reports of new business. We'll start, as always, with any items of new business from any members of the council. Any items of new business entertained tonight? Going once, going twice? No items of new business. We'll then turn to council member reports. Commissioner Neustadt.
Thank you, Mayor. The second annual Up and Down in Downers Grove, sponsored and presented by the Downers Grove Chamber of Commerce and Good Samaritan Hospital, will take place this upcoming Saturday, February 2nd, at the atrium of the Esplanade at Locust Point over on 2001 Butterfield Road. It's 375 steps to support a local not-for-profit organization. It's a fun event that I did not participate in last year, but saw a lot of great photos from and heard it was a tremendous success. So it's their second annual. It's a great event, and get some exercise at it. So sign up now at downersgrove.org for the website, more information. Thank you.
Sounds good. I hope to see lots of people out there. I'm going to try it this year. I had a conflict last year. Just please don't step on me as you run past me up the stairs. That would be appreciated. Commissioner Rankin?
Commissioner Newstat stole my thunder. I participated last year, and a new feature this year is they're allowing participants to donate a portion of their fee towards a local nonprofit. And so a group of the Grove Foundation people are participating, and if you do choose to participate, you should check off the Grove Foundation on your application so we can get a part of that revenue. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. Somebody will bring it up, but they haven't yet, so I'll just quickly mention it. Even though we've only had 2 meetings this month, we counted January 1st and we took the day off, so this is our 3rd. So, but next week we're having a special meeting on the backyard chicken issue. So that's next week. I urge everyone who has even a mild interest in it to show up and be heard or listen. And if possible, I'd like to see the meeting televised, but I guess that depends on where it is and so forth. But anyway, so the public, we are meeting next week, and we do have an issue, a major issue to discuss. Thanks, Mayor.
And that's at 6 o'clock.
6 p.m., yes.
Starting early, too.
Yep.
Right. And I was shocked. It took an entire hour and 14 minutes before anyone mentioned chickens. That was quite an accomplishment. And actually, just to get the terminology right, this is a meeting of the Finance and Administrative Committee, which is one of our standing committees. So it's not a special meeting. It's not a standing committee meeting. There's been some nomenclature issues that we've had. I mean, we have 3 standing committees that have been in existence for some time. They are used for focused, specialized discussion like this, and this one is being handled or hosted, if you will, by the Finance and Administrative Committee, which set up to do just this thing. Those are normally not televised. It's not as though we're not televising something on purpose. And we're just happy to have it on a Tuesday night because we're not having a council meeting that night. But as Commissioner Durkin pointed out, be mindful of the fact that that meeting will start at 6, not 7, because it is not a regular village council meeting. Commissioner Barnett.
I have no report, Mayor.
Commissioner Durkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I actually have a point of clarification. At the last meeting, I had spoken about the new stoplight that was going in at North High, and I had mentioned I'd like to see something similar to that at the South High School at the intersection of Dunham and 63rd Street. It was reported out by the Chicago Tribune last week that that was one of my, or actually was my comment, and I had a resident, 30-plus year resident from Downers Grove, inform me that there is actually the same light setup over at Dunham and 63rd Street. And our very fine village manager, on his lunch hour today, took a ride out there and checked it out and reported back to me that there's a little difference between that light and the light we all approved last week. And I only want to point that out because one of my concerns was the number of students and athletes that I constantly see at the intersection waiting for the light. And that is that in order to activate that light to work like the one on Main and, or I should say by North High, this one you actually have to put the pedestrian button to activate it. So once you push the button, it becomes a countdown pedestrian friendly light. If you don't, it maintains a regular system of the light cycle. And the reason that is, from what I've been told and staff research, is because of the amount of traffic that we have on 63rd Street and the different variants, or the variance of hours of times throughout the day that people would be using and activating that light. So I appreciate the residents reaching out. Glad to know that I misspoken. I know we try hard not to do that up here, but when we do, at least we can see that there is, somebody before us actually thought of this safety measure. I would just encourage that the staff at South High would educate their students and their athletes that the light does exist and how to make that light work. So I appreciate staff's time and Fieldman's time for going out there, and appreciate the opportunity to clarify a misquote or a miscomment of mine. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell.
I'd just like to point out that the FOWL, F-O-W-L, as opposed to the other kind of FOWL, report is actually online, and I would encourage people to read it and come to our meeting on Tuesday and voice your concerns, your comments, whatever it is you want to voice, but come to the meeting and let us know what you think about it. So we'll see what happens. And just a point of clarification, normally we have standing committee meetings on Monday, but Monday the 21st is a federal holiday. So in deference to that, we are having it on the 22nd. Well, just so people would know, we're having it on the 22nd.
Right. Otherwise, the conspiracy rumors were running rampant.
Exactly. So
Pecking around.
that's right.
Good one.
He got it.
And I can't bring any live stock.
No.
No.
Thank you. The only thing I will point out is just to remind everyone again who would like to address or meet or talk to the village council in a more relaxed and informal environment, we will be having a coffee with the council on the 19th of January at the Downers Grove Public Library from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. So whether your topic is chickens or stormwater utility or the OASIS program or anything else, feel free to come by. We'd love to hear from you, although just to let everyone know, there will be some part of the meeting that will be taken up by our good friends on the Downers Grove Public Library Board, who are going to be making some presentations to the council about some of the things they have going on. So we think that that will be equally of interest to residents of Downers Grove, who often ask us questions about the library, which is part of the village, but it's its own autonomous unit. So the library board members themselves will be there along with their director, and so folks who can learn more about the library and what they have going on, but there will, rest assured, be time for topics of discussion other than the library, and we'll try to balance those two things nicely. So if you'd like to come out, please do. We always like to see you. And with that, we cannot adjourn tonight. We need to go into closed session to discuss some personnel issues. So if I can have a motion to go into closed section, I believe it's section 2C1
Yes.
of the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
It is. I move to convene into closed session pursuant to Section 2C1 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act to consider the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employee of the village.
Second.
Any questions or comments about going into executive session? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.